Europe's populism is not confined to the ballot box, it's also playing out on the streets. The so-called Yellow Jackets turned widespread anger with French President Emmanuel Macron's economic policies into violent protest. People from the middle, and from the left and right, confronting police week after week. What is this, if not a populist movement? Across the Channel in the UK, this was a huge demonstration in favour of a second referendum on Brexit. Another example of people expressing frustration with their political class. In eastern Germany, anger over the ongoing migration crisis saw members of the far right, including neo-Nazis, in the streets of the town of Chemnitz. Violent protests over suspected crimes by asylum seekers were dark echoes of the past. Across the continent, this was another year of populist consolidation.
People are looking for that difficult combination of a greater sense of economic security, greater rights for workers, not just reducing ever more the rights and protections for ordinary people, but at the same time they're looking for that sense of cultural security too, around migration and globalization.
Populists are now represented in government in 11 European countries. 170 million people there now live in places where populists serve in the cabinet. In March, it was Italy's turn. Years of political corruption and the more recent strains of mass migration sparked a dramatic victory for a populist coalition. Matteo Salvini's right-wing League formed a government with the Five Star Movement. It embraced hard-line anti-migrant rhetoric and quickly backed it up, refusing to allow migrant rescue ships to dock in Italian ports. In Brussels, the new government quickly confronted the EU over its Eurozone budget limits.
If you'd said to me only 5 years ago that the League movement in Italy, which historically was quite a small separatist movement in the north, would become the largest political party in Italy, would enter government, and would basically be the only political party that is now growing in Italy, I would not have believed you.
In Hungary, Viktor Orban and his right-wing Fidesz party were re-elected with 63% of the vote. His continued refusal to cooperate with the EU's migrant policy retains support. So too his conspiracy theories of foreign political meddling. In December, Parliament voted through new laws limiting the freedom of the courts. The same thing is happening in Poland. A nativist, traditionalist party retains power and jostles with the EU over democratic principles, including the independence of the judiciary. Europe threatens punishment, but nothing really happens.
Many in the West perhaps bought into the idea that Central and East European powers would subscribe to both the economic and social planks of liberalism, whereas I think many in Central and Eastern Europe felt that they were broadly happy to experiment with economic liberalism, but they didn't necessarily want the social liberalism that went with that.
In Scandinavia, Sweden saw the right-wing Sweden Democrats fall short of their own optimistic election targets, but their vote share still grew. It was the same story in Germany, where the right-wing Alternative for Germany won significant vote share in regional elections in Hesse and Bavaria. They now hold 94 seats in the national parliament. And in December, in the Spanish region of Andalusia, a similar discontent with economy and immigration heralded the success of the ultra-right-wing party called Vox. Pro-nationalist, anti-immigration and against Catalan separatism, they won seats for the first time. At the end of May 2019, Europe's populist forces will receive a test at the ballot box. Millions of European voters from the 27 remaining EU states, without the UK, will elect their representatives to the European Parliament. The question keeping EU officials awake at night is just how many of those new members of the European Parliament will come from populist parties seeking to limit EU power and influence over their countries. The painful example of Brexit negotiations means fewer parties will campaign to leave the EU altogether. But populist parties are building partnerships to radically change the EU from within.
If you now consider, or you perhaps accept my argument, that increasingly liberal Europe, as best represented by Emmanuel Macron, is becoming the minority, and that conservative Europe, as represented by Salvini and Viktor Orban and Sebastian Kurz in Austria, is on the ascendant, then actually I think we are going to see quite a profound battle in 2019 and 2020 over the very soul of the European Union.
Of the 751 seats in today's EU Parliament, 151 are already occupied by politicians from parties that want radical reform of the EU. In 2019, that bloc could grow. All of them want to cut down the big EU institutions and their power to influence national law in member states. France's National Rally, formerly the National Front, wants to get rid of the EU Commission altogether. The big question is how effectively these disparate groups can work together. Depending on the number of seats they win, they could bring about real change. 2019 could be a year which sees populism become more entrenched than ever. Simon McGregor-Wood, TRT World, Brussels.